Hello class, so let us try to look at a few questions, especially focusing on the inscribed angles. Alright, so first question here. In this diagram, AB and then CD, they are all chords intersecting at E, where AD is the diameter. Now notice that diameter is usually a very important concept because it divides the circle into equal parts. If the measure of arc, CB, that portion is 82. And then they want us to find the measure of angle AED. AED. They're looking for this angle. Why don't I call that as X? Notice, because in this case we can find the measure of this angle as soon as we realize about this angle here. Since this half of the angle is 180 degrees, and this one is 82 degrees, one of the ways which we can figure out the measure of the angle X is simply this. X will be equal to 82 plus 180 divide the entire thing by 2. This will be the relationship between angle formed by two intersecting chords within a circle. Then here we're going to have 262 over 2, which will be equal to 131 degrees. Alright, let us move on to the second question. Here, a measure of the angle ABC is Z. So this angle is equal to Z. Then what is AOC? You see, the inscribed angle is always half of intercepted arc, which is equal to the central angle. Therefore, central angle has to be double of this, which is equal to choice 2. Now we have quadrilateral inscribed in a circle. Now, in fact, this is called cyclic quadrilateral. Now, let us try to realize one thing. J and M, what do we realize about these two measure of the angles? They have to be supplementary. And that is one of the properties of a cyclic quadrilateral. Another way for us to look into this is this way. If I call this measure as a small j and this measure as small m, you will realize that the m is half of all these measures of the arc, which will be equal to 2m. Since this is j, its intercepted arc from here to here would have been 2j. But you can see that these two add up to 360. So in fact, 2m plus 2j has to be equal to 360. When you divide the whole thing by 2, then we get to realize m plus j must be equal to 180 degrees. In other words, these two must be supplementary. Alright, let us move on to the next. We have two chords intersecting at E, and the other chord is wrong. Which relationship must be true? In this case, one thing that we know is, for example, angle ACB must be equal to angle ADB. Why? Because they share the same measure of the arc. Likewise, how about these two? They are two vertical angles. Then you get to realize that these two triangles, ACE and BDE, must be similar. Out of all these four, choice 2 represents that. Alright, let us move on to the next question. So we have the ratio DF. This portion is 5, so we're just going to call it maybe 5x. How about that? Since we don't know the actual measure. And then FE must be 2x, and EG will be 1x, and the other one must be equal to 7x. Now identify one pair of the inscribed angles that are congruent to each other. So in this case, one thing that which we get to realize is when you add them up, so 5x plus 2x plus x plus 7x must be equal to 360. Then here, we get to realize 15x must be equal to 360, where x, when you divide by 15, will become 24. So x will be 24 degrees. Now, there are a few pairs, there are in fact two pairs of the angles that are inscribed that are congruent to each other. For example, angle F and angle E. I mean DFG and then DEG. In this case, these are the halves of intercepted arc. So in fact, measure of angle DFE must be same as measure of angle DFG. This one must be G right over here. DEG must be half of 7x. That means half of 7 times 24 divided by 2. In this case, these two must be then equal to 84 degrees. Likewise, we could also would have done same thing here. Angle D and angle G. So measure of angle FDE must be same as measure of angle FGE. Once again, it must be half of this arc, which is 2 times 24 divided by 2, which will simply become 24 degrees. So we have two pairs, and if you just identify one of them, then it would have been okay. Alright, how about number 6? This is the new logo for this company. And measure of arc NK is 130 degrees. And measure of NK is equal to measure of NU. Then this must be also 130. Then you will realize that this is 130, 130, and if I call this one as X, we get to realize 130 plus 130 plus X must be equal to 360. In other words, when you solve this, X must be equal to 100. Now, what is the measure of KNU? KNU, this will be then inscribed the angle to this arc, so it has to be half of this. Then half of 100, this must be equal to 50 degrees. How about number 7? Since this question requires calculator, I'm just going to turn on my calculator. And as you get ready, let's try to look into this question together. A machine part consists of this diagram here. SE is equal to EA. Since two chords are equal to each other, we get to realize that these two arcs also must be equal to each other. Where S is 140, then this also must be equal to 140. Now find the length of SA, which is this bottom line segment. How would you do that? In fact, that's equal to 140, so we can say this must be equal to 70. And so is this one, 70. Then if I were to bring out the triangle alone, then we get to see that since it's an isosceles triangle, I can draw on altitude. When you draw on altitude here, you'll realize that it divides the bottom into two equal parts. And then it said this was equal to 10, since this is 70 degrees. Now, since if you draw on altitude, then this will be perpendicular to the base. Now then, in this case, with the measure of the angle 70 degrees, we should be able to figure out, let me call this one S maybe, base B. You get to see that cosine of 70 degrees must be equal to B over 10 in the triangle. Then what we can do is so here we have cosine of 70 is equal to B over 10. Then, what do you realize? Yes, making sure the mode is in degrees. So cosine of 70 degrees, it must be equal to this value. Then 10 times cosine of 70 must be equal to b. Then 10 times of that becomes 3.42 must be equal to b. But we are looking at 2b, b plus b, must be the whole entire line segment. So 2b, which is equal to SA, length of SA, must be equal to 6.84. They told us to put it to the nearest tenth. It would be 6.8. That becomes our final answer. Alright, that's it. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.